The reason is neither there was a CSR committee, nor there was recommendation, nor the board of directors wanted to spend. In other words, you can disclose that or you can disclose standard draftings. The question is, there was a duty on the person executive to spend the amount. There was also a duty to cast a CSR committee. The company as a whole was negligent in doing that. The default can be willful or non-willful. So there will be a lot of general provisions in the Act. When something has to be pinpointed, you will have a lot of law experts who will pull 10 different sections and make it a punishable offense. So was the board negligent? Maybe yes, maybe no. The question is who will decide? It is not that it will be decided within the framework of 4 corners of the company whether the board was negligent or not negligent. It will go to. It may go to. So we are dealing with sleeping drivers. Anytime they can wake up and raise pertinent questions. So before advising whether it is mandatory or not mandatory, consider how you are going to deal with those sleeping drivers who can raise questions after 4 years, 3 years or something like this. Then I leave it to your wisdom to advise it to your mind. And at the end of it, also remember, we should not, when it is dealing with CSR and talking to senior persons or veterans, we should not conduct ourselves that our character is considered very good. Please consider appropriately before what we say. Then, what we have, once it is there, ensure that the company spends. Now there is a point. If I undertake to spend it by myself, there could be genuine delay in execution of project. So it will look as if I am just giving justification year after year. Second, if I give it to third party from whom I cannot take money, and third party need not be an unrelated entity, it can be your own foundation. But you do not have right to take back the money, then effectively you are divested the money as donation. Because foundations, neither on standalone basis they are consolidated, nor on consolidated basis they are consolidated. If there is an effective divestment of funds, which cannot happen in first category, that is it is very difficult to find an institution for track record on the projects that you wish to spend. If at all you find that anyway you are divested, else if you have taken other 2 modes where you have effectively divested and there is an agreement that you cannot call that money, then at least it is out of your control. It cannot be an asset because it is out of your control, so by default it's a system within the meaning of companies. Now, the narrow point that is generally discussed or mentioned, or it's only a headline information, is if the company fails to spend, then disclose the reasons why it is not spent. Right, that's concerned, and it stops it. Fines and penalties. For this kind of area, the driving force need not be fines and penalties at the beginning of the year. If at all we need to know more whenever we are having subsequent sessions, and there is some implication, we can discuss more about fines and penalties. But the direct section which deals with fines and penalties, which is a very narrow interpretation, talks in few lakhs as well as interest. That's what it stops. Now, coming to revised schedule 7. When I look at what is the technical framework for CSR, the first is section 135. The second is schedule 7. The risk that we carry is we might have the copy of schedule 7 which is a bit old. After that there was revised schedules. So ignore old schedule 7, take revised schedules. Again after that, just 6 or 7 days back, there was a notification which clarify certain questions in relation to revised schedules. Only certain questions. So when we go for Q&A, or while we are taking this verbatim introduction, we will talk on this. Now when I'm looking at, it talks about 10 categories of expenses which are covered in Schedule 7. We'll go one by one a bit slow. The first thing, although I've attempted to put it in a bucket, we'll go for verbatim reproduction. Eradicating hunger, poverty and malnutrition, promoting preventive health care and sanitation, and making available safe drinking water. So I'll say this is more towards food and related items, including health. The question, think and answer. Is contribution to hospital covered? Yes. We'll try to read once again. That's why I'm opening the verbatim introduction. Eradicating hunger, poverty and malnutrition, promoting preventive healthcare and sanitation, and making available safe drinking. Are hospitals generally for reactive situation or preventive situations? A portion. If you have 10 stories, it is quite possible one floor is for preventive. That you conduct regular tests of eyes, you conduct regular tests of blood samples and other things. You give that service free of cost. But it is quite possible that 9 floors are dedicated towards reactive situations, like accident events, heart, cornea transplantation, not. So if I have to look at, it is excluded. This has been discussed in senior circles, and their view is also it is excluded. It was in drafting, it was they thought to be purposely excluded. Whether it is justified or not, we can agree, we can agree to disagree, but that's the position that has come out. Globally, it's not an acceptable practice. Globally, even if you are donating the entire hospital, or selling an entire hospital, it is an acceptable. I'll come back towards a more common effect towards the end. Just take the entire subject first, because if it is not falling in one, it is possible to make it fall in another. But from this purpose, it is not acceptable. It is not. The question second to you. Second track, promoting education, including special education, employment enhancement vocation skills, especially among children, elderly, and differently abled, and livelihood enhancement projects. So it's more towards promoting education. If you open an educational institution for senior professionals or executives, say I want to donate for a professional example, maybe doctors association, CAs associations, total contribution, set up, or I am setting up a big convention and one floor I want to give it only to professionals. Is it covered or not? Let us read once again. Promoting education, including special education, and employment enhancing vocation skills. Vocations are secondary skills in the profession. Especially among children, women, elderly and differently abled persons in life enhancement projects. We can agree to disagree, but looking at the spirit, the way the hospital was excluded, it looks like such kind of expenditure would attract controversy. We are not saying or concluding on this forum whether admissible or not admissible. In your wisdom, you are the best judge to conclude. I am reading the same thing, you are reading the same. Where there is difference of thought, there is a guiding principle which was issued 6-7 days back. It says that interpret the provisions liberally. And in that they gave an example of rural development and other things, but not these kind of examples, like contribution to hospital or contribution for professional service. So we can debate and win a debate or lose a debate, depends on the person with whom you are debating to a great extent. But that's the position I am bringing to your attention. Now a question for you. If you give a capital expenditure for setting up a school for children of the differently abled person, then whether it can be covered or not? Yes or no? Yes. There is a popular belief in a segment of accountants that only P&L related items are to be considered. It's not so. You can incur capital expenditure and divest it. The moment you incur a school but you keep it in your books as your asset, then it's your business asset that you have chosen. You have not divested. Even that can be debated as covered. But the spirit of this, the entire thing, they do not make, the company law is not making any distinction between capital expenditure or revenue expenditure. Once it is spent, it is spent. If I have to go with a normal logic, then more common men would like to fund a child, but a corporate which has a big pocket will donate a school. And the provisions are applicable to corporate. Nowhere there is a bar that you do not donate capital expenditure. The provisions of the CSR, at least for this case, what can be invoked is yes, it can be done. And it is not in the drafting, nowhere you can read it's specifically excluded. In other cases, you can read that those situations are the situation that you talked was specifically eliminated in the draft. But for these kind of capital expenditure, it is not eliminated. Moreover, creation of assets like wells, pipelines, rural development, those are in the nature of capital expenditure as well. And it is in other sub-segments included. So for all practical purposes, what it largely emerges in a non-controversial manner, the provisions of CSR does not make a distinction between capital or revenue. The third thing that is coming out is promoting gender equality, empowering women, setting up homes and hostels for women and orphans, setting up old age homes, daycare centers, and such other facilities for senior citizens, and measures for reducing inequalities faced by socially and economically backward classes. This is self-explanatory, and running through various lists of programs, we did not came across certain controversial things, so we will take it at face value. For this, ensuring environmental sustainability, ecological balance, protection of flora and fauna, animal welfare, agroforestry, conservation of natural resources, and maintaining quality of soil, air, and water. Here I will take two controversial examples. There are organizations on their own, when they discharge water, the discharge of water may be in river, but when they discharge, the quality of water is much better than the quality of river water. Technically, they are way ahead between the standards set by pollution control board. So whether such expenditure were business expenditure or not, that can be debated in many countries. Here, the taxman did not have reached to this stage of maturity to unearth those items for discussion. However, such kind of expenditure, which is an extra category of expenditure, which was not done for business expediency, whether it could be covered or not covered, you will have two minds in computing the same. But let's take a more clear-cut example. The clear-cut example is this. Quite some of your clients used to talk about wind energy projects. However, there were implications on Income Tax Act and they did it. There are few organizations which believes, although I am taking X units of power, it can be 300 megawatts of power. At least 5% of the power I generate through solar energy. If I generate power through solar energy, see, the cost is say 16 to 18 rupees per unit. But when I take it from the board, I may have a long-term purchase contract and short-term if I have. I may get that 4 rupees, 5 rupees, 7 rupees per unit. Because it was my decision in the favor of environment, not out of business compulsion. The business compulsion could be that it is a continuous backup. Continuous backup, people will go for diesel generation set, which could be having 8 rupees or 9 rupees. But the difference of 16 versus 6, whether it can be taken as CSR. Globally the view is yes. Whether that view is acceptable or not, we will test in Indian waters. Within the meaning of that 2%, that's acceptable. But there are a lot of organizations, out of their own corporate commitment and responsibility, they have taken that step. That 2% of the energy consumed, 3% of the energy consumed, I will take it through solar. Why? There are rippling effects. There is a development of solar technology if I buy. If I do not buy, top corporates do not buy solar technology, I will not see the marginal cost of making future solar plants approaching towards commoditization cost. I just see in the range of 40, 50 or 60 rupees per unit. So as part of responsibility, they have taken a decision that will support such projects. We will be the buyer of such projects. So globally, it's an acceptable view to take such expenditure also for the disclosure of CSR activities. If this is not green, then what is green? Give me a better example of being green. This is real green. Then you have protection of national heritage, art and culture, restoration of buildings, sites of historical importance, works of art, setting up public libraries, promotion and development of traditional arts and handicraft. Here, when we look at the common listing of projects, there are hardly any controls for inclusion or exclusion. So we will take it at face value. Another thing, especially contested in media as something lacking in India from Indian government. Although it's not really lacking, but it has come out as CSR as well. A welcome. Measures for the benefit of armed forces veterans, war widows, and dependents. 7. Promoting rural sports, recognized national sports, Paralympic. Paralympic is for physically challenged or even non-challenged persons. Suppose there is a group we call, say, women with height always remains small. It's not physically challenged, but it gets covered in the Paralympic. So Paralympic sports, including physically meant for physically challenged, and Olympic sports. So these are contributions for CSR. Contributions to Prime Minister's National Relief Fund or any other fund set up by the central government for socio-economic development and relief, welfare of the scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, other backward classes, minorities and women. There could be few phrases which could look political. Even if it is political, for corporate, they do not get into why the law is there. If it is there, meant for full compliance. 9th, contributions of funds provided to technology incubators located within academic institutions which are approved by central government. This is a very welcome move, and there are a lot of corporates. They may or may not say that. They generally buy technology from third parties outside India. Whenever there is a big setup, the technology is from outside India. That's a global. Now, once those technologies are there are a lot of premier institutions which approve corporates that you share to the extent it is shared. And even if they share, they do not have bandwidth or capability to understand that. They need further funds to understand that. So it's a catalyst kind of move by way of inclusion of such kind of expenditure. Finally, rural development projects. Quite often, especially mid-cap and smaller companies, they are being approached, or those who are not backed by proper professionals in terms of foundations, they are approached. मेरे खेत में बोरवेल लगा दो. Whether that expenditure globally is considered as CSR, yes or no? It can be an unrelated party. He says that he'll get water. Okay, मेरे घर में नहीं लगाओ तो पूरे गांव के लिए लगाओ. Borewells. Is it considered as CSR, yes or no? That's the difference between what we believe as a general understanding versus when it is branded or when we end up discussing with the relevant persons who are associated with foundations. All the good foundations have taken a categorical decisions that they will not fund it. Reason. The moment you fund any such projects, borewell is what? It just reduces the water level of the soil and it damages the environment. So contribution towards borewell in the field of sustainability is a taboo, is a stigma. You may give one or two of unnoticed, but as a policy to have 10,000 borewells, it's a stigma, it's a taboo. Why? It will just destroy the land. Against that, even if you are going to earn 4 times the expenditure, they call it water harvesting. It is expensive, but if at all it has to be done, it is water harvesting that you talk about. Or we connect it to canals and other things, but not the projects in the nature of borewells. Normal wells, you have a normal water getting into it. Borewell is something which is not generally supported by, and it is criticized by environmentalists. When I look at the issues that we generally come across with respect to CSR spending and the computation, we'll attempt to give you a neutral view. First, whether interest cost. Before I get into eligibility or non-eligibility. One of the welcoming rules in the spirit of the law is whatever is your direct expenditure fully deducted, but if you are incurring certain overheads, you are eligible to load that overheads in the CSR spending. But the cap of that overhead is 5% of the total expenditure. So if your profit is 10,000, 2% 200 crores. So maximum you can have overhead expenditure of 10 crores. So whenever you come across certain overheads related expenditure, wherever it is being included, yes, it is inclusible, but within the overall cap of 5%. These are applied provisions. That's simplifying for you. First, a company borrows funds for the purposes of contributing, so for the purposes of constructing a capital asset which will be eventually donated. In that case, whether interest cost needs to be included, the answer is yes. Second, where there is a group structure, because you will find that within a group there are 200 companies. Maybe the reasons are licensing, or a separate JV partner, or an investor, or a different nature of business, or decentralization. But when you pull the resources together internally, you can monitor it in a much more better way. In that situation, when an expenditure is made by company X, but not by other companies, can you take the calculation of the entire 2% in other company? The answer is no, unless the other company contributes directly or indirectly to the pool which is set up for common purposes. We have already covered as a clarification. The most common thing that we come across is, you may come across that under Factory Act, so and so limit is there, then you should have a hospital. Say more than 500 workers are there, then you need to have a hospital. You need to have a creche for babysitting if such and such number of women employees are so and so. All said and done, whenever such facilities are set up in the township, those facilities, it was earlier believed, or it is a general perception, that those facilities are for exclusive use of employees. When you go outside and really see those schools, it is not exclusive for employees. It includes ex-employees, their friendly, their friends, dependents, includes suppliers and other ecosystem in that locality. You may have, say, a plant which produces car, but when you look at the related suppliers, there are 200 suppliers in the vicinity which are supplying auto components. The school may be set up by the main company, but the use, apparently the perception could be, it is meant only for employees or their relatives. In reality, it is not so, it is meant for all. Although the name given will be Corporate House ABC School. Under such situation, if you continue to incur further expenditure, say it is a loss, or you are constructing more buildings, then whether such expenditure will be considered as CSR expenditure within the meaning of the Act? Yes or no?
No.
The answer is yes. Within the meaning of CSR expenditure. Other companies, globally people will say you use your proportion, etc., etc. But here